Hi, I'm Randall Allen Dunn, thriller writer. I write action thrillers that read like blockbuster movies, and I'm going to be reading aloud to you from one of my thrillers called The Red Rider. It's kind of like a combination between Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Batman. It is about a 16-year-old Red Riding Hood who is fighting a cult of werewolves, and it's told from her perspective. Helena Basque has gone through some serious tragedy, and she feels that no one is coming to the aid of her French province to deal with the wolves, so she feels it's up to her. Now, she was attacked by a wolf when she was just 7 years old, and it was an unusual large wolf that she doesn't believe was an actual wolf. It was something else, but it left her with triple scars across her face, which left her ugly to herself and to everyone in the province. So she's grown up feeling very isolated and very out of place. And she's grown up with a lot of fear and a lot of anger. Her parents would no longer allow her to wear the red hooded cloak that she used to wear as a child because they don't want to attract too much attention, with the wolves still out there preying on the villagers. So they've been living in terror for years and years. And after some tragedies happen, Helena has decided not to live in fear anymore. She gets some assistance from a friend of hers, Pierre, who is a blacksmith's son, and he designs this repeating crossbow, which allows her, now that she has learned how to be a skilled hunter, this allows her to fire up to 10 bolts at a time. So she can pull this lever back that fires in succession and can kill several wolves, because they don't know how many of them there might be, but she's decided to go hunting them. And that's where we pick things up at this point of the story of the Red Rider. She is going off on her own personal quest to find the wolves, hunt them down, and destroy them so that they can't hurt anyone in the village anymore. This is my bookmark. It has the tagline here: Little Red Riding Hood isn't little anymore. I'm going to read a couple of quick chapters that kind of show her first encounter with what it is she's dealing with. Chapter 22. Favreau's farm was easy enough to find. I just followed the smell. Even in the rain, the distinctive odor of pig manure spread for a mile. Smoke rose from a thin chimney above the farmer's spacious cabin, set in a broad clearing surrounded by dense forest. A long, narrow pig pen sat beside it, the large pigs kicking up mud and manure as the silvery moon rose above the trees. To the left of the pen sat a small and well-kept stable, housing perhaps 2 horses. Monsieur Favreau would have his eyes and ears pricked for any intruders. He must have noticed the same pattern of attack by now, how the wolf seized one of his pigs every other night. Tonight he could expect to lose another one. I climbed down from the saddle and led Crimson carefully around the perimeter. He moved so cautiously I don't think he broke a single twig. Hidden from the cabin windows by the horse stable, I crept toward the front with Crimson. Seeing me, Monsieur Favreau's horse started in alarm. I quickly found the feed bag hanging from a hook on the wall and grabbed a handful of oats. I held my hand open for the horse to see and sniff. He calmed immediately and let me approach so he could nibble from my hand. I shared some with his companion, who had just woken. I grabbed more oats and fed them again. Once they relaxed, I brought Crimson into the stable to stand between their twin stalls. I scanned the clearing. Nothing moved in the dark woods around the farm, though the drizzle made it hard to be certain. I hoped any wolves would have equal trouble spotting me. Dim light issued from within the house. Monsieur Favreau must have lit a lantern to keep a late vigil over his property. I grabbed more oats and prepared to lay the pile in my skirt. Then I remembered I was no longer wearing one. I stuffed them in my pants pocket instead, wishing I could store more. I reminded myself that the trousers still gave me the best advantage. I crouched and crept toward the pen. A few pigs squealed upon seeing me approach in my sweeping cloak. I scattered a few oats at them, and they returned to their agitated pacing. Farmer Favreau wasn't the only one anxious about the wolves tonight. I crawled carefully between the wooden bars of their pen. The pigs backed away and huddled against one another, but they no longer cried out. They gradually spread apart to move freely about the pen once more, though they kept an eye on me, snorting little warnings as they passed by. I crouched in the filthy mud and slop and waited, forcing my senses to adapt to the intolerable smell. At least the rain would wash away some of the manure from my clothes once I left the pen, but that would be a long time in coming. I would keep vigil until the wolf arrived. I felt the crossbow at my hip, not my father's, but Pierre's Chinese repeating crossbow. As brave as I made myself appear to everyone else, I couldn't afford to miss or waste time reloading. I sat for over 20 minutes. By then the pigs seemed to regard me as part of their pen, a piece of scenery to walk around as they continued their nervous pacing. Nearly half of them had fallen asleep. The others seemed as tense as I was. I finally sat in the slop. My knees and thighs were tired, and I no longer cared how I looked or smelled, or what I had to scrub off the cloak later. In any case, this almost guaranteed that the Leone family would not ask for it back. I leaned against a gatepost, turning my head now and then to check for anything approaching from behind the farmhouse. It felt good to finally rest. Nervous as I was, my shoulders and head felt heavy. I closed my eyes and thought of Suzette, sweet, pure Suzette, playing among the white daffodils in our meadow, running from me and laughing, her golden hair streaming in the biting wind. She ran toward the dark forest. Beyond the first line of trees, the woods were black as coal, except for the eyes. More than a dozen pairs of eyes shining from the darkness. "Suzette, stop!" Papa called from behind me. "Come back!" "Suzette, no! Suzette!" Mama screamed. Suzette continued to laugh and run in an irregular pattern, playing a game of escaping me, escaping us all, while the eyes watched from the forest. "Suzette, turn around!" It was Francois Revelere shouting, beckoning her back. Suzette wouldn't listen. "Helena, go after her," Papa told me. "Bring her back." I stood where I was. I watched Suzette laughing and playing as she drew closer to the forest. "Go, Helena," Mama urged. "You can get her. Bring her back." "But the wolves," I muttered. I felt a tremor through my skin, like a spider crawling up my spine. "You can bring her back, Helena," Francois said. "You're the only one who can do it." Suzette giggled and dodged back and forth, closer and closer to the forest, to the waiting eyes that had grown in number, nearly 20 of them now. "But they'll kill me too." "Helena," Mama said in a quiet voice. "Helena, please." "You can do it, Helena," Papa said. "Bring her back. Bring her back." A tear flowed down my cheek. "I can't." Suzette's laughter echoed from the forest's edge. "Can't catch me." Then she turned and ran straight into the dark abyss, where teeth flashed open beneath each pair of eyes. "Papa?" I started suddenly. Soft rain fell on my cheeks, and I rankled at the damp odor of pig manure. The tiny voice came from the front porch. A little freckled girl stood there in her nightgown, staring out into the dark clearing. I looked and saw a heavy-set man standing between puddles, holding a musket. Farmer Favreau, no doubt, watching for the wolves. I had dozed off, never even noticed him leaving the house. As he surveyed the outer perimeter of trees, I craned my neck, letting the rain needle down on me. Moonlight shone between rolling clouds directly overhead. I had slept nearly an hour. I looked back at Favreau as his gun whirled in my direction, its barrel aimed squarely at my hooded forehead. I sat frozen in the mud and darkness. The mustached Favreau stood rigid, squinting through rain at the pig pen, watching for any movement, listening for any strange sounds. I made none. He finally relented and turned slowly back to the trees, while rain pelted the surrounding leaves. I felt my heart start beating again. "Lucille, go back to bed," he called over his shoulder, still watching the forest. "I'm not sleepy, Papa," the girl complained, rubbing her eyes. I estimated her to be 4 years old, a year younger than Suzette, but just as lively, just as playful, just as innocent. "Get back inside," I muttered in a violent whisper. "Into bed," he repeated. "Your mother wouldn't have wanted you out in this cold, God rest her soul. Now go on." I swallowed. He was a widower, raising little Lucille on his own, just the two of them. "Papa, what are you doing? Did you hear the wolf?" I felt my breath through my teeth. I alternated between my study of the trees and of the inside light shining on little Lucille's white gown. "Get back inside," I murmured again. "I heard something," Favreau said over his shoulder. "Might be that wolf, so go on inside like I told you." "Yes, Papa," she said. The rising irritation in his voice finally convinced her. My shoulders relaxed. "Look, Papa, there it is!" Blood flooded my temples as I sat higher. Lucille was right. Striding forth from the forest was a gray wolf, taller and larger than a normal wolf. It grinned, showing no fear of the musket. Perhaps it had never seen one, or simply didn't fear it. The rain fell harder as I raised Pierre's crossbow. If the wolf didn't fear a bullet, it certainly wouldn't fear a bolt, until I sank enough of them into its belly. At least that's what I hoped. It padded through the muddy field toward Favreau, as if daring him to shoot. "Get inside, Lucille," Favreau ordered. "Kill it, Papa! Kill it before it takes another pig!" "Inside, I said!" Favreau couldn't escort his daughter to safety and face down the wolf at the same time. He leaned his head to one side and sighted the animal patiently. Letting it draw closer into range, he waited for the right shot and pulled the trigger. A beautiful shot right to its face. It sent the beast spinning backward to the slippery ground, dead. Favreau lifted his head as Lucille jumped up and down on the porch, her fists raised in victory. "You did it, Papa, you did it!" The clearing fell quiet. The creature was dead. It was over. I was never even needed. I felt relieved and strangely cheated, but I couldn't help but feel grateful over the huge wolf carcass lying still on the soaked grass. Then 4 more wolves padded into the clearing. They emerged at once, from 4 different positions, like an organized battalion. They marched at Monsieur Favreau like soldiers, as large and grinning as the first one. Chapter 23. Favreau stood staring at the gathering wolves, his fingers loosening and tightening on his gun. They moved closer, ignoring their fallen companion as the mounting rain pelted his carcass. "Papa, there's more of them!" "Get back inside," he said quietly. He started to back away slowly. The wolves picked up their pace. Favreau continued to back up. He lifted his musket to a firing position, but abandoned the effort as the wolves kept coming, kept grinning. They weren't rushing at the pigs, or even at Favreau. They focused their attention beyond him, at the porch, at Lucille. My head pounded with terror. They had planned this, waited for this opportunity. They stole a pig every couple of nights to draw the family out into the open until they found an opportunity to attack Favreau's daughter. Then they all emerged at once, the same way they must have attacked Francois at his home. Favreau would never get Lucille inside before the beasts devoured them both. I flicked out one of Pierre's blades and sliced into the side of a pig standing in front of me. It squealed in pain and ran to the other side of the pen. The wolves jerked their heads toward the commotion as the pigs started to rush back and forth, thumping and sliding against one another. I cut into another one, encouraging their panic. 2 wolves sniffed the air, perhaps smelling the flow of animal blood. I rose, my cloak billowing up from my shoulders as I raised the crossbow. The wolves gaped along with Favreau and his daughter as I rushed between the pigs to the gate. I kicked up at the top bar, flinging rainwater from it as it flipped open. The pigs spilled out of the pen and darted back and forth across the clearing, slipping and stumbling in terror and confusion. The wolves continued to stare as I marched out of the pen and fired my crossbow at the nearest brown beast. It fell to the ground hard. The others snarled and charged, struggling for traction. "Get inside," I ordered Favreau. "Who are you?" "Get inside!" I stepped sideways, angling to face the next approaching wolf. The others closed in, eyeing me warily. I pulled back twice on the crossbow's lever, firing one bolt into the first animal's gut, the other into its paw. My racing pulse had thrown off my aim, but at least I wounded it. I moved in a curving path between the pigs as they skidded through the muddy grass. The other wolves circled around me, arching their necks to peer over the pigs as they tried to get at me. Between the misty haze and the wild flurry of pigs, I couldn't tell whether there were 3 wolves or 2. My heart and the pigs were both racing too fast for me to tell. The wolves ignored Favreau and his daughter, focusing on me as he scuttled her into the house and shut the door. That was all that mattered. The wolves bared their teeth, dripping with saliva. I registered 3 of them surrounding me, a gray one to my left, brown to my right, and black behind me. The rain had played tricks on my eyes. What seemed like a perfect hit on the second wolf must have only grazed him. 2 of them charged from either side. I whirled to fire a bolt into the gray one's stomach as it leaped at me. It spun and rolled aside, howling, while I dropped backward to the ground and planted my elbows in the mud. Then I kicked at a squealing pig as it scurried in front of me and thrust it at the attacking brown wolf. The startled pig knocked it a short distance away, stopping him for a second, long enough for me to roll to one side and fire a bolt behind me into his companion, then to fire 2 more into the brown wolf as it bore down on me, dropping it to the puddle-soaked field. I scrambled to my feet, 3 bolts left. The gray wolf struggled to its feet and turned to lunge. I fired once, keeping my final bolts in reserve. It spun to the ground as the black wolf struggled to rise and sprang at me. Another bolt finished it as the gray wolf reared back to lunge again. I tugged back on the lever, sinking my last bolt into its heart. It fell in a heap and lay still. I stood in the quiet, chest heaving in the drizzling rain, waiting for my pulse and heartbeat to slow while the remaining pigs squealed and ran in circles through the clearing. My hands shook. I took deep breaths, ordering my arms and shoulders to relax. I reached into my pouch for another round of bolts and started loading them into the top slot, one by one, in case there were more of them. More of them. I turned back to the clearing where the first gray wolf had fallen. The grass there was matted down a little where the wolf had lain, but it was now gone. The rain wasn't playing tricks on my eyes. 4 wolves came from the forest, but after I struck down the first one, 4 wolves remained. Only one of the wolves was gray. The first wolf, the one Favreau shot with his musket, it had risen to join the others and attack me again. The wolf nearest to me, the one I shot 4 times, groaned and rolled to its side. Then it rose and shook its head to recover. I watched, crossbow ready, as it studied its wounded paw, from which a bolt still protruded. 2 similar bolts remained embedded in its stomach. It lifted the paw to its teeth, bit hard on the bolt, and tugged, nearly dislodging it. Then the creature set its paw down and reached for the bolt with its other paw. I gaped as it wrapped its claws around the bolt to seize a firm hold, the way a human would, and pulled it out. It dropped the bloody bolt to the ground and turned to me as I tried to comprehend its impossible feat. Crimson whinnied from his hiding place in the stable behind me and burst into the clearing. He pounded toward me at full gallop. I grabbed onto his saddle as the wolf's jaws opened to chomp at my legs. Crimson whisked me away and raced into the woods as I hung on with one foot in the stirrup. Behind me, 3 other wolves rose in similar fashion, grinning and showing little signs of the battle. Crimson knew when to run. So that is a taste of what happens in the Red Rider. I hope that you've enjoyed hearing some of this, and please go and check it out for yourself online at booksellers like Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And if you like videos like this or other videos that I'm doing, please like and subscribe on my YouTube channel, and I will do what I can to get you more of them. Thanks for watching. I'm Randall Allen Dunn. Have a great day.